Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is Thursday, July 11th, 2013, and welcome to the newest edition of Hate Live Podcast. I would say what episode number it is, except that I forgot. And without further ado, here is your host, Darkside Dictator Phil. Yes, welcome everyone, welcome to the United States of Phil. I am the Zodfather, the almighty ruler. Oh my god, yes. Welcome to Hate Live, everybody. I'm excited. I'm excited for tonight because it's been a couple weeks since I did Hate Live. And I have a lot to talk about. We got some cool gaming news this week. Actually, there's something that happened last week that I still want to talk about officially here on Hate Live, but we got some other cool developments, trailers that came out, DLC announcements, different stuff. We had some controversy this week with some gaming stuff that we want to discuss. Okay. And then in addition to that, obviously I want to talk about my gaming schedule, what's going on, what game that I'm playing right now that I have some opinions about. Back in the day, we're going to have the new Back in the Day segment where I'm going to talk all about Final Fantasy tonight. It's going to be all about my history with the Final Fantasy series, okay? And all the different Final Fantasy games that I've played over the years. It's going to be pretty exciting. And then we're going to have an open Q&A session, okay? So please submit your questions via the stream chat if you are watching live on Twitch. And the third segment, I will be answering those questions. Now, the way that this podcast works is that it's 3 segments, and I take commercial breaks between the segments to rest my voice and, use the facilities and such. So if you're watching this on Twitch, just stick around for those commercial breaks, okay? If you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to have timestamps in the description of the video here where you can click and just skip right past the commercial breaks and head straight over to the next segment of the show. So please don't complain that I didn't cut out 3 minutes here and there. You can just click on the timestamp and go straight to the next part. One last thing, some people recently have been asking me, am I ever going to make this show audio only or available as an audio only download? Well, the bottom line is this. I don't know where I would do that, okay? Simply because I don't have like a storage FTP server or anywhere for me to do that kind of stuff. However, there are plenty of free services on the internet that you can use to convert a video to an MP3. One of them is actually, I believe, called keepvid.com. It's one that I use when I actually am trying to make compilations and stuff at the end of the year for my videos, and I don't want to bother rifling through my thousands of videos that I uploaded that year. Rather than that, I just go straight to the video on YouTube and I use that to download it, and you can have it as a video or as an MP3. I give you permission to download the Hate Live podcast as an MP3 using a third-party site, okay? So if that's you're interested, you like to listen to it on your iPod or on your iPhone or whatever when you're out and about, I give you permission to download the show as an MP3 so you can do that, all right? Okay. All right, so we're going to start with basically reviewing what I've been up to this week. I'm going to talk a little bit about the games I've been playing. Then I'm going to talk about what's coming up later this week, all right? And then we're going to move on to some gaming news, and that's going to be segment 1. So, this week's been an interesting week so far simply because it's a down week. It's a downtime week. There's no new releases whatsoever this week, not even like a DLC that I would want to play. So I've been trying to find a way to fill the gaps and fill the time for this week, but at the same time, I didn't want to go into retro overload. As you know, I am in the middle of the summer of retro, and the summer of retro is where I'm going to be playing different retro games from the SNES era that I think are some of the best games of all time, games that I grew up with, okay? But I don't want to overload you by doing 2-3 of those playthroughs at once. So right now I'm in the middle of Earthbound, and I'll be honest, Earthbound is an extremely long game. It looks like I'm actually going to beat it the next time that I play it. So this weekend, Earthbound will conclude, and I'll be moving on to the next Summer of Retro game, which I think is a game a lot more people are interested in seeing, A Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, okay? So anyway, yeah, so, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to overload by playing more than one at a time. So I'm juggling a few things. I got my usual series, Demon Souls and stuff are going to continue on this week. John's going to be here on Saturday. We're going to do our first WWE pay-per-view zooms in a while. But I started Metal Gear Solid 1, okay? Now, this is a game that people were asking me to play for years, okay? But it's a game that they did not remake in HD. I guess the rumor right now is that Kojima is actually fishing around looking for a company that he can outsource this project to so they can port it to HD. but as of right now, it's not in HD, and I just didn't want to wait anymore. This week was the week when the Metal Gear Solid Collection was actually released, and I've already played all the other Metal Gears. This was the only one I hadn't played yet, or Metal Gear Solids, let me put it that way. So I decided to play it. Now, admittedly, I'm sucking in many parts. There are actually some parts I'm not sucking so bad at. I think I am doing better at this playthrough than I did at Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, but I think that's simply because at this point in the past year, I've played Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, and 4. So when you play 3 Metal Gear Solids in a year, you probably get accustomed to a lot of the gameplay elements. And so it's not I'm failing, but it's not I'm failing because I'm fumbling with the menus and stuff or anything like that. No, now it's more that I just don't know what to do to beat certain stuff, and there are different methods to do things in this game that can make it a lot easier, and I don't know a lot of them. So what I'm doing is a lot of the time I'm attempting to do, like, fight a boss, and I'll try 3, 4, 5 times, then I can't figure it out, then I'll look at the stream chat, okay? So that's my kind of philosophy I'm going into playing Metal Gear Solid this week, okay? By the way, I am very much enjoying the game, even though I do think that the cutscenes are insanely overblown, and as usual with Kojima, he goes off on stupid tangents. He's talking about the fucking Alawi Indians and some shit, and there's love on the battlefield. It's like, what the fuck is he talking about? Overblown. I mean, that is the blueprint for Kojima. Everything is overdramatic and overblown, but I was expecting that, but it's still fun to poke fun at it, during those extremely long cutscenes, okay? Now, admittedly, I am sucking in a lot of parts, too. There was like 2 boss fights today that I just sucked so bad at, but I did get by them. I pushed by them and got through. So, I am enjoying the game. My feelings on the game are this. I can understand why the game is revered as like a classic, a game that a lot of people hold in high regard as something from maybe your childhood or your younger years that you played and you liked it a lot. If you want my honest opinion, I don't think the game has aged very well. I think that a lot of the things that were improved in 2, 3, and 4, that aren't present in 1, made those better games and more playable games. This game, in a lot of ways, it's like you need to know exactly what to do, and if you don't, you will just like repeatedly fail and fail and fail until you figure it out. What I would say is this seems like the kind of game that once you play through it once, and it's really difficult that first playthrough, that if you were to play it through a second and third time, now that you know the methods to do things easily, it's probably a much more enjoyable game. And I can almost feel that's probably how people played the game back in the day. The first playthrough, they kind of suffered a little bit, but then they learned everything about the game, and the second, third playthrough, they loved the game. So I completely understand why it's held in such regard. Like I said, I don't think it's aged well, but at the same time, there's these moments of greatness when you're like, I know why people love this game, okay? Just the boss battles alone are pretty neat, that you had this wide variety of bosses in the game, all of which are completely different. Okay, I guess except for Sniper Wolf, who's the same fight twice, basically, but really good. And, it's solid gameplay, it's interesting, it's fun. The production values were high for the time. So, again, I understand why people hold it in such high regard. And, I may play the game and rage Kojima. And I actually made a joke today, the Kojima World Order. I said, that's it. The whole world is now controlled by Kojima. Kojima is flawless, and he makes no mistakes when he makes games. It is the KWO. And I started, Kojima. I started doing that in the videos today, and it was hilarious because some people thought it was funny as hell, and the Kojima fanboys got insanely pissed and started raging that I would make fun of Kojima in the game, and I'm not taking it seriously, and blah, 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 blah. Whatever, people are going to flip out as much as they want, but, it's kind of funny that people do hold Kojima, some people, not everyone, I don't want to overgeneralize, but there are some people that are just such fanboys that for you to even say one negative thing about the game, I'll be honest, that stupid helicopter, the Hind boss fight, is annoying as fuck. It takes 1,000 fucking missiles to shoot the thing down. What fucking world does it take 14, 15 missiles to shoot down a fucking helicopter? Hate to tell you, but helicopters aren't very tough. If you actually just hit the blade of a helicopter, it'll fucking crash, okay? Same thing, there was this part with 3 dudes who were ahead of me, like, waiting for me to come down the corridor. So I sniped them with headshots, and it takes 3 headshots, alright, with a sniper rifle. What the fuck was Kojima thinking there? You could shoot missiles at them, and they still don't die. You have to repeatedly shoot these guys. So it really is annoying in a lot of parts. And I call that out, and people are, oh, how dare you? How dare you criticize the greatness that is Metal Gear? How dare you? It's like, grow the fuck up. It's a video game, alright? Look at the further installments where that kind of stuff was fixed. So obviously Kojima knew that this game needed to be improved, and that's why stuff like that wasn't present in the future games, okay? But like I said, I can still understand the greatness that's here and how it set up this legacy for a great game series. So I do respect it. Even though I make fun of Kojima or whatever, I still respect him as a game developer, and I do actually like the game. I'm looking forward to actually beating the game tomorrow on my first stream, which probably is going to take me forever because I heard that there's one boss fight that's like insanely hard, and even people who are good at the game sometimes have difficulties with it, so this should be interesting. The thing that I like the most, though, are the people, DSP blames the game instead of himself, which I've done since day one, since the very first video I ever put on YouTube was of me blaming the game that I was playing. So I've done that since 2008. Why would I stop now? You know what I mean? Like, this is me. This is my style of reactions and of comedy or whatever. Why would I change that? It's not like Phil specifically picked Metal Gear to blame. That's not the case. I do that with every game that I do a playthrough of. So I love it. I love people who get all up in a tizzy about shit when really that's what I've been doing since day one. Okay? Alright, so outside of Metal Gear, which I'll be beating tomorrow, like I said, Earthbound is going to complete this weekend. I'm going to start Zelda: Link to the Past in this next coming week, okay? Tomorrow night, Friday night, Demon Souls returns. We're going to have Friday night Demon Souls, which should be fun here on stream. And we're getting near the end of Demon Souls. From what I'm to understand, there's only like 2 more full stages for me to do. And then there's, I think, 3 big boss fights, and that's the end of the game. So there's a possibility that I'd probably say not tomorrow, I probably won't, but probably 2 more streams of Demon Souls, and I may actually beat it, which is crazy to think about that I may actually beat Demon Souls that quickly. And if I do, what I'll probably do, maybe I'll replace that with Fallout, and we'll have Friday Night Fallout or something like that, so that way Fallout can be played more consistently. We'll have to see. I'm going to do something to replace that, definitely, because I like having that recurring thing once a week going back to a certain game, okay? Saturday, John Rambo will be here. We're going to be doing a new episode of Smarter Guys here on the stream, and also we're going to be, for the very first time in 3 months, we're returning to our WWE pay-per-view simulation matches, and we apologize that it took so long to get back to it. John has just been so slammed with working on Schnozman Hole Punch, and these past few months he's had many opportunities to get all the actors together and do a lot of filming, and so that's what he's been doing. So the past 2 times when we were actually going to do these simulations, he had to cancel because he was going to be working on Schnozman Hole Punch. Therefore, finally now, he's got enough footage that he's not really filming anymore, and so we'll be here and we're going to do Money in the Bank pay-per-view simulations. The way it's going to work is like we did for WrestleMania. It's going to be a live stream here on Twitch, which is going to be very similar to a live WWE pay-per-view broadcast. We're going to do the introduction, we're going to do the first match, then as we're setting up for the next match, we're going to run a commercial break, and then we're going to have just like WWE does, between matches they run their promos and shit for other stuff, for their movies, and for their shows and their other shit. We're going to be running commercial breaks between the matches, so it's going to be very similar to actually watching the Money in the Bank pay-per-view on Sunday. Okay? Now, we're going to have to do a few adjustments. I know for a fact that the game does not support 7 wrestlers in a match, and both Money in the Bank ladder matches at this pay-per-view are 7-man matches. So in that regard, we can't do full 7-man matches, so we're probably going to have to cut 1 or 2 people out of those matches, but it is what it is. You know what I mean? We're going to do our best to make the simulation good for you, all right? So that's going to be Saturday. Sunday, it might be the conclusion of Earthbound. It all depends. If I beat Earthbound quickly, maybe I'll start Zelda. But I'm thinking maybe there will not be a second stream on Sunday. I'm going to repeat that. There will not be a second stream on Sunday because for a change, I actually want to watch the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Okay? So what I'm actually thinking of doing on Sunday, it's the first time I'm really doing this, is that during the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, people can come here to my Twitch TV channel, Darkside Phil, and we can all chat about the pay-per-view live together, alright? So how cool would that be? Similar to what we did during the E3 press conferences, we can all sit here in the chat and chat together during the Money in the Bank pay-per-view Sunday night, alright? So Sunday night, no second stream, we're going to be watching the Money in the Bank pay-per-view, and you'll be able to chat about with it live here on my channel, so that'll be pretty cool, okay? So that's Sunday night. And then next week is interesting because we do have a new release. We have Dynasty Warriors 8, which it's looking like, we haven't finished all the logistics of it yet, but it's looking like it's possible to do a cooperative playthrough of it. And I have not done any gameplay with my girlfriend Panda Lee in a long, long time. It's been months now since we did anything together. and she likes Dynasty Warriors, so we're actually looking to do possibly a full co-op playthrough of the story of Dynasty Warriors 8, but we have to see if we can get it to work. The problem that we're currently juggling right now is that everyone's telling me, and I don't know if anyone's aware of this, but everyone's telling me that the game is actually made for PlayStation 3 and is only being ported to the Xbox 360. And people are reporting frame rate drops and problems graphically with the Xbox 360 version. So obviously, if that's the case, I would want to play it on PlayStation 3. But the problem there is, if I'm going to do co-op, any kind of co-op, with Leanna, or anyone for that matter, on PlayStation 3, as you know, the microphone sucks. It sounds terrible. Even on a wired headset, it sounds like someone's in the bottom of a toilet bowl that's flushing on their face when they're talking. I don't know why the audio quality on the PlayStation 3 is so shit for voice chat, but it really is bad. So, now we're debating, well, what's more important? Is the audio of the gameplay going to be more important, hearing our voices, or the visuals? Are the visuals going to be the more important thing? And I can't answer that. So now I don't even know what version of the game I'm getting. I know that originally I did reserve the Xbox 360 version, but I may switch over to the PlayStation 3 version. I'm actually talking with Panda Lee about that, and we're going to try to decide together which version to get, okay? So, I do want to warn everybody that, you know, I'm telling you right up front, and I'm going to talk about it in the weekend preview this weekend as well, that more than likely the gameplay of Dynasty Warriors 8 is going to have Panda Lee in it. Now, I know that some people might not like her. That's fine. Then just skip the playthrough. I'm perfectly okay with that because I haven't done something with her in a long time. I want to do a gameplay with her, and this is going to be it. This is the thing that I've chosen to do, okay? So, that's going to be coming up this week. But the other thing that was announced this week is that there's actually going to be a DLC for Metro Last Light, and that first DLC is coming out this week, supposedly. I'm not 100% on what the DLC is. I don't know if it's multiplayer. I don't know if it's like a story-based DLC, but there is one coming up, and if it is a story-based DLC, I'm probably going to do it, okay? I don't know if anyone in the chat can even answer that. If you know if it's a story-based or a multiplayer DLC, because I didn't do enough research, honestly, to find out about that. Like I said, though, if it is story, I am interested in doing it. So that's coming up this week. Plus, of course, people are saying it is story-based. Okay, good. That's good for me, because I would love to do that DLC. I think people really enjoyed the Metro Last Light playthrough, so going back to that should be fun. And, yeah, the very first story-based DLC should be good, okay? That's the rough gist of what's coming up this next week, just as a preview. I'll talk more about it in the weekend preview on Sunday, so be sure to catch that. That's going to probably be live streamed right before I watch the WWE pay-per-view, by the way, okay? Okay, so that's pretty much the review of what I've been doing and what I'm going to be doing in the next week. I think it's going to be fun. I do want to say thank you for those of you who are watching the streams and watching the playthroughs on YouTube, even though I know this is filler content. Like today, I know I uploaded Earthbound and Metal Gear, and pretty much no one's really watching it yet. And I understand, it's the summer, this is filler content, so there's some people who aren't even caught up to that point. Like Earthbound's at like part 60-something already because the game's so damn long. You know, take your time, watch it at your leisure, but, you know, please do check it out. Don't just say, oh, it's not a new game, and just completely skip all the content. I think you're going to be missing out on some good stuff. Some of the crazy shit in Metal Gear Solid, like of me failing epically, is pretty good, okay? Alright, so now let's talk gaming news, because there's a few news stories that have come out of gaming in the past 2 weeks since I've done Hate Live that I want to talk about. The first of which is actually Don Matrick. Now, I talked about this a week ago on Ask the King, but I want to talk about it officially here on Hate Live. It's been announced that Don Matrick is leaving Microsoft, or by now he might have already left Microsoft, and he's becoming the CEO of Zynga, okay, which is a mobile games company. So to give you some background here, Don Matrick is the guy who was the head of the interactive entertainment division at Microsoft. He was basically the head of the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One for the past several years. He was the one who presented the Xbox One for the first time, and apparently, from what people are saying, a lot of the design choices of the Xbox One were literally his personal choices that he chose to put inside of the console, okay? So we're talking things like you can't trade in games, The game gets assigned to your gamer tag, and that's the only way you can play it. You can't even lend games to your friends. Always online requirement. Apparently this was like his brainchild, and he was primarily responsible for these things to be in the Xbox One. And of course, after the gigantic backlash at E3 of how negative these things were and gamers didn't want it, and then Don had to take it all back. A few weeks ago, if you remember, I think that was the last time I talked about gaming news, Don Matrick came out publicly and took it all back and said all those negative things are out of the console. It's going to be just like a traditional console where you buy games, you don't have to always be online. We're changing it all back to the way like a normal console operates, all right? So I said, I think it was exactly 2 weeks ago on Hate Live, I said, listen, Don Matrick needs to be fired. Don Matrick can no longer work for Microsoft because if Don Matrick continues to work for Microsoft, in the eyes of the common gamer, Don Matrick is that evil face. The guy who only cares about his money and greed. Screw the gamer. Here's all these anti-gamer practices. He's the one who presented them, so he's obviously going to be the one who's going to be associated with the negativity of Microsoft. So I think Microsoft really needed to get rid of him in order to move on and even have a chance with the Xbox One, and that's exactly what's happened here, all right? Now, do you really think that Don Matrick, if he had a choice of staying at Microsoft, being the head of the whole interactive entertainment division, or moving to being the CEO of a much smaller mobile gaming company that, by the way, is in dire straits and may go bankrupt soon, do you really think that's what he wants to do? Of course not. But I think what happened is that the shareholders probably contacted company leadership and said, Don Matrick's an asshole. He just made Microsoft look like crap at E3. No one's going to buy this console, and we have all our money invested in your stock. You need to get this asshole out so we can get rid of the negativity and we can go back to being a solid company. And I think that's what happened. Microsoft probably told him, listen, Don, sorry, your ideas are horrible. No one didn't go over with the gamer. Tough luck. You gotta go. And I doubt that they fired him. There was no official word that he's fired. But I think that behind the scenes they probably said, we're going to get rid of you or lay you off or do something. So Don probably was already in talks with some other companies, regarding job possibilities. Zynga was probably one of them. And of course, Zynga is in such dire straits financially, they need new leadership. So they're desperate to get Don. And it was funny because Zynga actually tweeted this. I swear to you. Zynga tweeted, congratulations to Don Matrick. We know that as our new CEO, we're very proud to have you, and we're going to do well in the future, something like that. To which I actually responded to Zynga, and I said, you should be terrified that he's coming over to your company. This guy single-handedly sunk the Xbox One, and you're happy he's coming? Like, you've got to be really fucking stupid and desperate to want that kind of person in your company. But I think Zynga is that desperate that they don't care. They just need any kind of change. And so they're thinking that Don's going to somehow magically save their company. I don't think Zynga's going to be in business for much longer. Let's put it that way. Okay. So that's one big gaming story, all right? So now the question is, will the Xbox One succeed now that the Don is gone and that negativity is not associated with them anymore? And we don't know. Because our gamer is going to give Microsoft the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, you listened to us, you took away the negative shit we didn't want, we're going to trust you. Or they're going to say, well, what's to stop them from at one point changing their minds and going right back to it? So I don't know. I don't know if people are going to trust Microsoft or not. But it's a shame because there are so many console exclusives, one in particular, Killer Instinct, which I'm looking forward to immensely, that may not do well if people don't buy the console. And that would be terrible, okay? So I guess it remains to be seen what's going to happen with that. Okay, also in gaming news, some big controversy this week. Really weird thing happened regarding Nintendo and EVO. Now, EVO is the national fighting game tournament in America, okay? They like to say that they're the biggest tournament in the world, but I don't believe that. I don't know if there's not another tournament that could be just as big, okay? But they are the nationals for the United States. And they had an event. It was a really good thing that they did. They decided to do a donation drive because they wanted to add one more game to the EVO lineup, okay? So what they decided to do is they had a donation drive where if you donated money, the game, out of this listing of possibilities that they had pre-chosen, the game that earned the most money for cancer research would actually be the final game to be featured at EVO as a tournament. And so all these people donated money. Super Turbo was one of the candidates. Melty Blood, I think Guilty Gear, all kinds of stuff, okay, was in the running. It turns out that Super Smash Brothers, I forget if it's Brawl or Melee, whatever the last one was, won. Okay, actually won, and it raised over $94,000 for cancer research, which is amazing, and that needs to be applauded, that $94,000 was raised for cancer research because of this game. All right, so that's a huge, massive, positive thing. Okay, so it's announced Smash Brothers will be at EVO, and this has been known for months now. Okay, this contest was much earlier this year. All of a sudden this week, it's announced by EVO. Guess what, everyone? Well, unfortunately, what we like to do is we like to stream our finals every year. For the past several years, they've been live streaming all the finals of their games. Unfortunately, this year we will be unable to stream the Smash Brothers tournament because Nintendo is not giving us permission to go ahead and do so. Therefore, we're moving the whole schedule of everything around. Smash Brothers won't even be played on Sunday. We're going to replace it with something else so you can see the finals of a different game on Sunday. Okay? So this was announced. Everyone in the community, and now we're not just talking, the Smash community, we're talking anyone in the gaming community who heard this was like, what? So let me get this straight. A tournament wants to feature your game, which, by the way, is an older game and not many people are playing it anymore. They want to feature your game, which are probably going to reinvigorate people to play it. Probably people are going to see it and go out and buy it again and start playing it again. All right? May even reinvigorate the whole competitive scene for your game. People raised $94,000 for cancer research in the name of your game, and you're going to deny the tournament the ability to stream the finals? What the fuck is wrong with Nintendo? Seriously, like, what the fuck? First, they announced that they're going to try to steal ad revenue off of anyone who does Let's Play footage on YouTube of a Nintendo game. Now this, it's like, have they totally flipped on their head and become evil? Like, what the fuck? What were they thinking? And it was just this question. Everyone was just scratching their heads. Why would Nintendo do this? Like, it's the most huge anti-gamer practice you could do. It's the biggest slap in the fucking face to anyone who's a fan of Nintendo and Smash Brothers, saying, fuck you, we don't care what you want, it's our intellectual property, regardless of the fact that it's going to help us, fuck you, we do what we want, and we say, no, you can't do it. Like, there was no logical reason for them not to allow the finals to be streamed. So all of a sudden, this was announced, okay? And then all of a sudden, all over the internet, social media picked up, Kotaku and other gaming news sites picked up on the story. People started tweeting Nintendo like crazy. Are you out of your fucking mind? What's wrong with you, you selfish pricks? Within hours, Nintendo apparently changed their position completely, flipped it on its head, and contacted Evo and said, oops, oh no, go ahead. You can stream the finals. Sorry about that. You can stream it. So it was the weirdest thing, because it was literally like within a 12-hour period, you had this huge negative thing, and then it just kind of flipped. But it's like, why was it? Where was the miscommunication here? Was there some problem with Nintendo? Like, is there some spokesperson for Nintendo that like is just an asshole? And so they asked the wrong guy, and the guy's like, oh no, we take a strong stance against our IP. You cannot stream. But then when they realized what the situation was, and they were going to get such negative press about it, then they decided to flip it. Apparently, a few years back, MLG, Major League Gaming, also was doing Smash and was trying to stream Smash Brothers, and they were told by Nintendo they couldn't. So this whole thing is just a weird clusterfuck of confusion. And so far, no one from Nintendo has come out and apologized. No one has come out and made a public press conference or announcement explaining what happened. But people are just like baffled that behind the scenes Nintendo had this happen, and now they look like shit. They really do. They look like shit that they even initially denied the fact that they would be able to stream the finals for this game at EVO. So, very, very weird week in that regard, okay? All right, the last news story that I want to talk about is, oh, it's a big one. It's a very interesting one. Grand Theft Auto 5 had a new gameplay trailer released this week by Rockstar Games. And it was all 100% in-engine gameplay, which was awesome, that you finally got to see the game in engine for the first time. And it showcased a brand new feature of the game, okay, that a lot of people were wondering, how is this going to work? Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Grand Theft Auto 5 is going to feature 3 protagonists for the very first time. 3 main characters are going to be featured in the game. And a lot of people were wondering, well, how's that going to work? Are you going to be going between the stories of each character? At the beginning of the game, do you maybe get to select one character, and that's who you play for the whole game? But no, it's finally been explained in this gameplay video that the way that it's going to work is there's going to be missions where all 3 guys are participating. So you may have 2 guys breaking into a building. One of them has explosives that he's setting up to blow down walls. One guy's covering him with guns. And then you may have the 3rd guy completely across the street at the top of a skyscraper covering you with a sniper rifle, okay? And you can, on the fly, switch between the 3 characters to have them perform critical moments in the heist or whatever the mission is that you're doing. And they actually showed some of this on the fly, how it's going to be going around. It looked great. I mean, I'm going to be honest with everyone. Some people are like, that's not Grand Theft Auto. To me, I really felt that Grand Theft Auto 5 needed to do something different. Because let's be honest, Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas were all very similar games. Now, of course, yes, there were some improvements between them, but they were very, very similar games. Grand Theft Auto 4 kind of took the more zaniness of those games and put it in a more realistic setting, but I don't think a lot of people liked that. A lot of people said, oh, we don't like that. It was too realistic. We wanted it to be more of the zany, off-the-wall kind of mayhem of the previous games that we had. And then people said, well, what are they going to do for 5? So now it seems like they're adding in a completely new gameplay element that's going to change the way that the game is played. To me, it looks refreshing and interesting. Now, how this will actually be implemented is a huge question, all right? Another thing that I'm wondering is it possible to do missions but only play as one character? So let's say you only wanted to be the sniper and all you wanted to do for the whole mission was cover the other 2 guys. Can you? Or is it going to be that you are forced to be switching between the guys on the fly in order to actually get the game to move? Because what I was thinking is this could potentially be a game where multiple playthroughs are warranted. Because maybe you just want to play as one character the whole game and only see his perspective. And then you want to play the whole game as another character to see their perspective on the same missions, but also to see their own individual stuff. One of the things that was actually shown... One of the things that was actually shown was that the characters, when you're not controlling them, will actually go off and do their own stuff. So there is going to be AI in the game that'll control what these guys are doing. So one instance, they actually showed one guy just like walking down the street, then they showed another guy like shooting, and then they went to the 3rd guy, and the 3rd guy was like racing in the car. So it was like they can actually simultaneously be doing different things, which is kind of interesting. So I'm wondering if that's going to be possible. Like, could you do multiple playthroughs? Could you experience it from the different perspectives? We're going to have to see. There's not as much information yet that we'd like. But another thing that was announced in this trailer was Grand Theft Auto Online. Now, the way that they said it, it was very odd. They were like, and then, of course, there's the multiplayer component, Grand Theft Auto Online, which we'll be talking about at a later date. And it was like, so it's not going to be like Grand Theft Auto 4 was, where it sounds like, if you remember Grand Theft Auto 4, you were able to join a lobby, and in that lobby you could free roam the entire city of Liberty City, but you could also participate in mini missions, you could participate in races, you could participate in the things that other people were doing. This almost sounds like it's a whole separate game or a separate mode from the main campaign, which could be quite interesting, especially because, as I previously announced, this year my plan is to bring back the return of the Suicide Kings. Now imagine if there's a whole awesome, robust online mode where we can do Suicide Kings. We could actually have like 16 people crashing cars into each other, jumping off of skyscrapers, flying planes into each other. How fucking insane would that be? That would be an insane amount of fun. I think people would love that, and it could actually be an ongoing series where I do streams and people jump on the stream, participate with the Suicide Kings, and then I make video series and montages for YouTube of it. It could be amazing. It could be a potentially huge, awesome new thing coming in September. I can't wait for more information on Grand Theft Auto Online because it sounds really good, and I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with it, okay? So that was the big news this week. The new Grand Theft Auto trailer was released. A lot of people are liking what they're seeing. I definitely liked what I saw. And I am I am very pumped now for the game. Let's put it that way. I can't wait for the game to come out. Of course, the one thing, the big thing, the elephant in the room, everyone's wondering what's going to happen with Let's Players. Are we going to be allowed to live stream the gameplay? Are we going to be allowed to live stream the plot? Are we going to be allowed to direct capture and put those videos on YouTube? Or is Rockstar going to be a huge fucking dick and start copyright striking everyone who puts up videos of the game? Which I really hope they don't, but if they do, I don't know what I'm going to do. I might have to figure out a workaround. I don't know, but we'll have to see what happens with that, okay? Alright, so Grand Theft Auto 5 coming in September. I'm excited for it, and I can't wait to see what happens with it, okay? Alright, so that's going to finish the very first segment of Hate Live. I'm now going to take a very short break here on the stream. Again, if you're on the stream, just stick around. I'll be back, and we're going to do Back in the Day, where I'm going to talk all about my experiences with Final Fantasy growing up, okay? If you're watching this on YouTube, take a look right down into the description of the video. I've got timestamps. Go ahead and click on the timestamp for the next segment that you want to watch, and you can completely bypass the commercial break while I rest up here with my voice, okay? So thanks a lot, everyone. We will be right back with more Hate Live. Stick around. Okay, everybody, welcome back to segment 2 of Hate Live, which is going to be the Back in the Day segment where I'm going to talk about things from my gaming childhood and growing up being a gamer, okay? Now, excuse me, you can still submit your questions right now via the stream raffle. If you are watching this live on Twitch, please continue to submit questions for the third and final segment, which will be coming up in just a short while, okay? Okay, so today's Back in the Day segment is going to be interesting because I'm going to be talking about a particular line of games, a line of games that is very well known, that have undoubtedly have changed, evolved, and just become a whole different animal than when they first started. Of course, the line of games that I'm talking about is Final Fantasy, okay? Final Fantasy is a very classic line of games. Just the name is synonymous with a certain kind of turn-based gameplay and a large arcing story, colorful characters, high production values. All those things have always been a part of the Final Fantasy kind of style of game. So what I want to talk about is how I first got turned on to Final Fantasy. I want to talk about basically my experiences with Final Fantasy, what I think about the different games and which games I've played, and all my experiences with the series as a whole over time and how it's changed and evolved over the years, okay? So, Final Fantasy 1. In the United States, Final Fantasy 1 was an NES game. Now, I actually never owned Final Fantasy 1, okay? My cousin did. He actually had the game, and he would play it from time to time at my house. And when he did, I would see him, I was like, "Ooh, what is that?" And he would show me what it is. I was like, okay, I see what it is. But I never played it. I only saw him play it, and, you know, I would sit there and kind of just soak in what it was. So, really, I had never experienced a JRPG until I actually physically played Dragon Quest. Now, in America, I don't know if people know, if everyone knows this, but Dragon Quest was not called Dragon Quest in the United States. For whatever reason, they rebranded it and started calling it Dragon Warrior. I don't know why. I have no idea why, okay? But they called it Dragon Warrior. And I started playing Dragon Warrior, and I'm going to be honest with everyone, I didn't really like it that much. I thought that it was a little bit boring. You know, back then I was I was much more around the action-based gameplay. I loved platformers, I loved fighting games, I loved that kind of stuff. I wasn't really into, you know, a turn-based kind of game where you had to wait around and do a lot of reading. I wasn't up on that too much. My other cousin, who was a girl, actually really loved Dragon Warrior, and she actually played it to the end and beat it, okay? But I didn't get it, all right? And then I remember reading Nintendo Power, and they said, Final Fantasy II is coming. And I said, wow, Final Fantasy II. Now, I remember my cousin used to play Final Fantasy 1, and he really liked the game, but I never played it. So I wonder what this game's going to be like. And I started looking at it, and I'm going to be honest, for the time, the graphics of Final Fantasy II were some of the best available, especially on the SNES. Just the style of art, the beauty of the characters and everything, like the enemies and everything, they looked great. And then I even said there was going to be a full orchestral soundtrack, and you know, everything I saw in the magazine for Final Fantasy II looked amazing. Now, I didn't know how the game was going to play. I didn't know much about it, but at that point, most of the games that I had played, like I said, had been action-based. It was more about platforming and shooting, or, you know, fighting. It wasn't really about a giant, long, arcing story with good, interesting characters or anything like that that would really grip you and want you to continue to play for hours on end. So, I got it. I eventually did get Final Fantasy II. I remember it was quite expensive at the time. It was actually I believe one of the first games on the SNES where you could actually save your game on the cartridge. Now, yeah, you could do it with Super Mario World, and pretty much all the SNES games were like adopting it, but I remember it was like one of those slew of games, one of the first ones where you could finally save your game rather than have to put in a password or whatever. So it was really neat to say, wow, I could sit here for a little while, play the game, and then go save my game, and then go do something else and come back and continue. So Final Fantasy II, for those of you who aren't aware, actually in the United States is not really Final Fantasy II. For whatever reason, I guess Nintendo realized that probably if they released 100 Final Fantasy games on the NES that they weren't going to sell well. So they released Final Fantasy 1, and then they never actually released Final Fantasy 2 or 3 in the United States as a retail game for the NES. Instead, they waited for the Super NES, and then they released Final Fantasy 4 which is what it was called in Japan and everywhere else, as Final Fantasy II in the US. So the game that I'm talking about is Final Fantasy IV, not really Final Fantasy II, but I didn't know that. I didn't know any better. Okay? So I remember playing it. I remember booting it up. And the first thing I said was, wow, look at the graphics. The graphics are awesome. The sound is what blew me away. It was like it used the full effects of whatever the musical chip was inside of the SNES, and the amazing sounds that I heard coming out of that game were like, it sounded like there was an orchestra in my fucking bedroom, and I couldn't believe how well the music was done. And of course, that's mainly in part to Nobuo Uematsu, however you say his name. You know, Nobuo Uematsu Uba. I don't know how to say it, but he's an amazing composer, an amazing artist, a musician, and his music is just, it kicks ass. And not only was it beautiful, but it was catchy. Some of the, you would think, you know, there's the main theme of Final Fantasy. Da da na 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 na. It almost sounds like a when you get married, you know, when they play "Here Comes the Bride." It's an iconic song, kind of like that, and so it resoundingly stays in your head. And that's really what hooked me. And for the very first time, here I had a game with a wide cast of characters. It wasn't just like a narrow focus on one or two people. The cast of characters frequently changed. You start off with one certain group of people. You mix it up, you meet up new people. Some people die, some people survive, and that was crazy too. Actual death in a video game, that sticks. Not someone dies and comes back again. No, you stay dead, and these characters don't come back. And it was like, wow, you became invested in the game. You felt that the story was developing at such a complex level that you really, the investment of time that you were putting into the game, which could take up to, I think that game could take probably around, if you're playing it for the first time not knowing what to do, and you die a lot, it could take you like maybe 12 hours to beat, okay? So, you know, a game like that, it blew me away, and it was like my real introduction to JRPGs, my first real serious introduction to JRPGs. And I'll be honest with everyone, I was dead hooked on the game. That was one of the few games that I played and learned every fucking secret in the game. I knew where every single secret was. I found every item. I did everything, okay? The rarest sword, the rarest drops. That I remember in the last dungeon, you have to keep fighting this enemy like 1,000 times, and it finally drops this rare item, and you can use that rare item to get another rare item. I did it. I did like everything there was to do in the game. And I played the game probably as a child several times a year. I'd play it maybe 2-3 times a year because I liked it that much, okay? So Final Fantasy II, my first serious experience with the JRPG, and I fell in love with it, all right? So then, of course, when Final Fantasy III was released, I was even more so blown away because they had improved on the graphics, they had improved on the music. It was a two-world system now. It wasn't just, oh, you're in one world and yeah, maybe there's the moon and underground, but this was a full two-world system. The game threw me for a loop because halfway through the game, if you didn't see my playthrough last year, you definitely got to check it out. But halfway through the game, you think the game's over, and then the game just slaps you in the face and says, no, the game's not over. You've only just beaten the first half. Time for the second half now, son. And you're like, you're completely blown away, okay? And it was amazing. I loved Final Fantasy III, and anyone who saw my playthrough of it last year knows that. Now, again, it's important to note, when I'm saying Final Fantasy III, I'm really referencing Final Fantasy VI, because again, Square did this where they didn't release every game in the United States. They actually completely skipped Final Fantasy V, never released it, and then released Final Fantasy VI on the SNES, but rebranded it as Final Fantasy III in the United States. Why they did that? Because Final Fantasy II was actually a hit, so I don't know why they did that and skipped on 5. That was really weird, but they did. That's what they chose to do. Okay. Then, Final Fantasy kind of went on a hiatus, okay? Now, don't get me wrong, there were other Final Fantasies that I did play. My cousin actually owned a Game Boy, the original Game Boy, and she played, I forget what the name of it was. It wasn't like Final Fantasy Chronicles. It was like, there were 2 Game Boy Final Fantasy games that my cousin played, and I played a little bit on her Game Boy, so I got a taste of those, but I never beat them, okay? And then there was actually Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which was a different kind of Final Fantasy game. It was a very simplified game, probably for younger audiences who didn't have as much of a difficulty spike as some of the other Final Fantasy games did. It was a lot more kid-oriented. It wasn't as violent. but it still featured really great music, fun gameplay, and there was actually a little bit of an action aspect to it that wasn't present in the other Final Fantasy games that have been released for the SNES. And I actually really did like Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, although it definitely was a lot shorter than the mainstream Final Fantasy games. But it is a game that I played and I definitely enjoyed as a child as well. Alright, so then, the new generation of games came out, alright? And the Nintendo 64 came out, but there was this big controversy at the time, because here's what happened. Nintendo, in all their wisdom, they've been like this forever, they thought they knew better than everybody else. And they said, listen, we really like the cartridge format. All these other systems that are being developed are all saying they're moving over to CDs. We're not doing that. We're going to put out a new console that's just as good as those, but runs on cartridges. And they did. They called it the Nintendo 64. The problem was, cartridges, number one, were a lot more expensive to develop and produce, and number two, held significantly less data than a CD could. So when Square was actually developing the next Final Fantasy game, they said, we can't fit this fucking game on a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It's too big. And Nintendo said, well, tough titty, we're going ahead with our cartridge-based system. So Square said, all right, then, to hell with you. We're going to develop our next Final Fantasy game. We're actually, for the very first time, taking it off of a Nintendo console, and we're putting it onto the PlayStation 1. And this was huge news at the time. Every gaming magazine's all they talked about. Huge news, Final Fantasy jumping ship from Nintendo to Sony, backing Sony. This is actually going to give Sony like a killer app to buy the PlayStation 1 for. You're definitely going to want a PlayStation 1 to play the next Final Fantasy game. And that's when all the hype started for Final Fantasy VII, and people were like, it's going to be the best Final Fantasy ever, because they can't even fit on a cartridge, there's so much content, and it's going to blow you away, it's moving into the 3D realm for the first time, 3D graphics, it's going to be gorgeous, it's going to have awesome sound and whatever. And, you know, I bought into the hype, I did. I said, wow, this is, you know, I can't wait, because I remember, I played Final Fantasy 2 and 3, or at least what I thought were 2 and 3, and I absolutely loved the games. And I said, wow, they're jumping to 3D. It's going to be so much of a better game. I cannot wait to play this game, okay? So I remember, this is a funny story. I remember the day when Final Fantasy came out, Final Fantasy VII. I think it was actually 7/7/97. So July 7th, 1997, it came out in the United States. And I went to EB Games, Electronics Boutique, to pick up my game. And there was a giant fucking line of people. I was like, there's so many people here to buy this game. This is nuts. And I guess what it was that if you were one of the first, like, 50 people to buy the game, they had promotional posters to give you, and it was a two-sided poster. One side was, like, the box art, and the other side was actually, like, a map of the overworld of the game. So people were, like, loving this. Wow, I came early and I got a map. I remember the guy that was number 50, he got the last poster, and the guy behind line him, he was like, no, you're kidding me, you can't be out, you can't be out. He turns to the guy who's number 50, and he goes, dude, I want your sign, or no, I want your poster, can you give me your poster? And he's like, no, I'm not going to give you my poster, what are you, out of your mind? He goes, all right, I'll pay you, and the guy takes out his wallet. Now keep in mind, this is probably like a guy in his early 20s, so this isn't like a kid who's like begging his mom for the poster, this is like an adult. Oh, I'll pay you. And he pulls out his wallet, and he's like taking wads of cash out of his wallet. I'll pay you for it, man. I'll pay you. I want that poster. And the guy goes, you're out of your mind, buddy. You're not getting my poster. And the guy was like so upset. He was like flipping mad that he couldn't get this poster. Meanwhile, I'm sure the thing's worth nothing today. You know what I mean? But it's just so funny. It was like back then that kind of collectible shit was such a big deal. It wasn't like today where every game that you pre-order, you get a pre-order bonus poster and, you know, some kind of swag or whatever for the game. You didn't really get that often back then. So those people were just like so blown away that you were getting this, and the guy wanted it so bad. He's chasing the guy through the mall with money out of his pocket like a knucklehead. All right. So here's my honest opinion on Final Fantasy VII. All right, and I know this is going to be controversial. A lot of people have asked me about Final Fantasy VII in the past, and what I thought about it, and what the Square did with it. If you want my honest opinion, I think that Final Fantasy VII was a critical development point for the series. It was where they decided, whoever it was who was in charge, said we don't want to keep making the same style of game. We want to start mixing it up. We want to start changing things so that this could be like we could say it's different, all right? And so they changed some critical things, although for the most part, the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII is extremely similar to the same turn-based combat of the previous Final Fantasy games. But they made critical design decisions with the game that kind of threw me for a loop, all right? Number one, the music. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some iconic tunes in Final Fantasy VII, like the boss theme, or the theme of, what was it, Red 13's Town or whatever, where it goes dun 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 bum 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 bum. Like, those themes were really iconic, but again, guess why? Because Nuobu was the guy who did the music for the game. But for me, and this could just be me, but I was like an audiophile. Like I said, I really liked the audio of the Final Fantasy series. It didn't sound as good as the music that was on the SNES cartridges. It just didn't to me for whatever reason. I actually thought that the music that came out of the SNES cartridge sounded more like an orchestra than the tunes that came out of Final Fantasy VII on a PlayStation 1 off of a disc. And in fact, in some parts, I almost felt that like the music sounded like MIDI music from off of a computer. Now, you might not know what a MIDI is, especially since they've been outdated for a long time, but it was a music format back in the 90s people used to make songs with, but it's a very low-quality format. You can't do high-quality audio on a MIDI, but that's kind of what it sounded like. It almost sounded to me like they had good music, and they compressed it to make it fit on the disc, and somehow it lost its quality. And I don't know, maybe it's just me being an audiophile, but I always took issue with the way that the Final Fantasy VII sounded, okay? Now, another thing that really, really pissed me off about the game, the ending. It's horrible. Every Final Fantasy game up to then had an ending that fleshed out what happened, especially the two that I had played, Final Fantasy 2 and 3, you know, which is what they were called in the US, had extended endings where you would follow along the characters, find out what happened to the characters after the game ended. It even had kind of epilogues. Final Fantasy 3's ending is like 25 minutes long. It's insane. That's like the best way to end a game. Final Fantasy 7, there's a final boss, and then a final boss after that's kind of weird because it's nothing like anything else in the game, and then one pre-rendered cutscene that lasts like 30 seconds, and the game fucking ends. I remember beating Final Fantasy 7, okay? And I stood there at the ending screen when the credits started rolling, and I went, is that it? I just played this game for how many hours, and that was the fucking ending? I invested all this time and effort into the game. This is a series that always has had rewarding endings. What the fuck happened? It's almost like they didn't want to end the game. They didn't have a definitive ending, so they just said, here, look at this generic cutscene that doesn't explain anything, and the game's over. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, seriously, like, what the fuck were they thinking with that? I just, to this day, I still can't understand what they were thinking, okay? And also, I didn't like the fact that in Final Fantasy VII, you could only have a 3-character party. This was the very first Final Fantasy game where they reduced the party size. Ever since before then, it had at least been 4 characters at a time. This was the first game where it was less than that. It was only 3. And I said, I don't understand. If you have better technology, more storage capacity, better graphics, why would you reduce the amount of characters that you're playing with? And that's what I really found odd about the game. I liked having a big party with a variety of characters who were all unique and different. Instead, now it was more like, well, here's three and too bad. Deal with it. And it was funny because since then, think about Final Fantasy since then. A lot of them, including 8, I don't know about 9 because I didn't really play it that much, but 10, 10-2, they all have 3 characters. Even today, Final Fantasy 13, 3 characters. Like, why did they reduce it to 3 characters and then stick with that formula? I don't understand that. Very confusing to me, okay? So, I thought that Final Fantasy VII was a disappointment. Not to say that I didn't enjoy the game, I absolutely did. There are a couple parts that I really fucking hate, like the stupid Shinra Tower. It's the most stupid, you don't know where the fuck to go, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, you have limited resources, it just keeps droning on and on and on. And there's some parts of the game that are like that, and I'm like, they could have definitely streamlined this game and made it a little better. I actually liked the pacing and the combat and the gameplay and the story of Final Fantasy 2 and 3 a hell of a lot more than Final Fantasy 7. But the thing that really pissed me off is that the game got insanely overhyped just because it was on PlayStation 1 and on a fucking disc. It was like, it's the first 3D Final Fantasy, it's on a disc, it's the best Final Fantasy ever. Like, no, it's not. I actually like Final Fantasy 2 and 3 better than I like 7, but people were just like insanely hyped for this game. Now, for a lot of people, Final Fantasy VII is the very first Final Fantasy game they ever played, because that was the era when they got into console gaming, and for them, they almost put it on a pedestal and say that's like one of the best games of all time, to which I beg to differ. I'm like, sorry, if you haven't really played all the other Final Fantasies, you can't make that statement, alright? Final Fantasy VIII came out like a year or two later, and it was awful. Final Fantasy VIII is one of the worst games I've ever played. It was just a grind. The characters were awful. They were all fucking annoying. I hated them all. I didn't care what happened in the plot. The plot was going like way off the rails. I didn't understand what the fuck was going on. It had this stupid card game you had to learn to play the game, which I didn't care. Like, a lot of these games, they have mini games. Oh, that's cool, it has a puzzle mini game or whatever, but they're optional. In this game, it was fucking mandatory that you learn this stupid card game, which I didn't give two fucks about, and you had to play it to play it. I played through, I think it was like disc 1 and 2. I think Final Fantasy VIII either had 3 or 4 discs, okay? And I remember specifically, I was bored to tears with the game. I just didn't like it at all. And then it came to the end of a disc, and it was like, put in the next disc. And I did, and I saved my game. And that was the biggest mistake I could have possibly done, because I didn't know this. But at that point, if you save your game at that point immediately after swapping discs, you couldn't go back and grind any. And immediately after swapping discs is a big boss fight against a boss that's really tough, and I hadn't been grinding enough to be high level enough to kill the boss, and I couldn't proceed. Basically, my game was over, because there was no way for me to gain experience points to get enough to level up and be strong enough to beat this boss. So I literally couldn't beat Final Fantasy VIII unless I started over, and I said, I'm not fucking starting over, this game sucks ass, and I didn't beat it. I never beat Final Fantasy VIII because of that, okay? So, after Final Fantasy VIII, after just the horrible taste that it left in my mouth, I purposely stood out of the way and skipped Final Fantasy IX. Now, I've actually heard from several people that it's a shame that I did, because apparently Final Fantasy IX kind of went back to the game's roots, back to the days of kind of a more traditional Final Fantasy, 4 or 6, and that actually plays a lot like that, and that's a better game than Final Fantasy VIII was. But because of that, I actually never played Final Fantasy IX until excuse me again, years later. Apparently, I guess there was I wanted to see for myself what it was, because I had skipped it, but I never had it for the PlayStation 1, and I believe it was during the era of the PlayStation 2 that someone said, oh, it's emulated now, you can try it. So I will admittingly say I did start playing Final Fantasy IX. I played it for like an hour and a half, okay? But what ended up happening was, apparently the emulated version had bugs, and mine corrupted, and I couldn't proceed. Like a screen, I was supposed to be walking onto a ship or something, and it wasn't there. It was like walking into thin air, and then the game bugged out and crashed. So I never really played Final Fantasy IX. I played like an hour of an emulated version of it, and that was it, okay? Now, fast forward to Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X happened a few years later, and that was on the PlayStation 2. Now, I had the PlayStation 2, but I primarily had the PlayStation 2 to play Street Fighter. So I'm talking games like Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, which was in the Anniversary Collection, Capcom vs. SNK 2, and there was a version of Super Turbo that also was put out for the PlayStation 2. So that's primarily what I had the system for. I didn't really play PlayStation 2 games on the PlayStation 2 outside of fighting games. So I completely missed out on a big era of gaming. Like I said, God of War, I started playing it and never finished it. I just never beat the game. There were some games that I would buy because people would say, oh, they're good, they're hype. I would buy them, and I would just not play them. I remember people telling me at the time I was working at, I think it was Best Buy, and people were saying, Phil, you got to play Kingdom Hearts. You've got to play Kingdom Hearts. I said, well, what's it like? And they're like, well, it's a role-playing game from Square Enix. I said, no, I'm not playing it. They fucked up Final Fantasy. I'm not playing Kingdom Hearts. I refuse, and I never did because of that. Because I literally, Final Fantasy VIII left such a bad taste in my mouth that I kind of boycotted Square for several years, okay? So, years later, finally, I had a PlayStation 2. I only had it for fighting games, okay? And finally, it was now a bargain game, Final Fantasy X. It was years after it had come out. And I've seen ratings on it, people said it was pretty good, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I'll try it. So I remember buying it, and it was cheap. I think it was like $20. It was one of the greatest hits by that point when I bought it. And I tried it, and I hated it. I fucking hated it, man. Like, I don't know what it was. I don't remember, because I don't remember much about it. But I just remember not liking it at all. I was like, the graphics were great. I remember that. The graphics were great. But the music, I think, I'm not positive on this, but I know at some point during here was when Nuobu stopped making the music for the Final Fantasy games. But I just didn't like a lot of the music of Final Fantasy X for whatever reason. I remember playing it. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the giant anthropomorphic blue lion guy that was really stupid looking. Maybe it was because I thought the protagonist was a whiner and he was just really fucking annoying. I didn't like him, but I just didn't like the game, and so I never played. It was funny because I had actually bought both Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2 at the same time, and I opened 10, played it for a few hours, disliked it so much that I never played Final Fantasy X-2. I traded it right back in. I never actually even opened it. Which is kind of funny. Okay. So now, fast forward to a year or two later when Final Fantasy XI was released. Now, Final Fantasy XI was an anomaly. It was an MMO. And I was like, why the fuck? Now they're really going off the rails. First, they ruined the series by changing it, and I really don't like it. And now, they're making it a fucking MMO of all things. Now, like everyone else, I had played World of Warcraft. I mean, at that point, pretty much everyone who had experienced World of Warcraft. I had played World of Warcraft for a few months with some friends of mine, and then I kind of got bored of it. I was like, I really don't care about going high level and doing all the high level shit. For me, you know, I already had friends, so it wasn't like I needed the social aspect of World of Warcraft to interact with my friends. I was already a part of the Street Fighter community, so I already had a group of people who I was traveling with and doing fun stuff with as a hobby. So really, it never really caught on as much with me. I completely understand why people can get hooked on MMOs, because I was hooked for like a month or two, but I fell out of it, alright? Now, during this period of time, I actually tried out several different MMOs, one of which was actually City of Heroes. Now, City of Heroes I enjoyed very thoroughly. I thought it was an extremely good game for what it was. I had a hell of a lot of fun playing City of Heroes, and then subsequently later on I played City of Villains, which I also really enjoyed. And those are two really good games that unfortunately they ended. I wish that they could like make a new one, a new modern version of it. I think it would do well, but for what it was, I really enjoyed those games, okay? But I did actually also play Final Fantasy XI. And I have to tell you, comparing Final Fantasy XI to World of Warcraft and City of Heroes, the game was awful, okay? And me and all my friends who we've been playing all these MMOs together, we played Final Fantasy 11. We went into it with the mindset was, we're going into this that we're going to have an open mind, we're going to play it just like we did those other MMOs. We maybe played it a month, and we said we can't play this game anymore because it had a massive amount of game bugs, okay? It was an insane grind. Like, the game was one of the biggest grinds I've ever seen in my life. Most of the game was just repetitive grinding to try to get your character to minorly level up so you can finally go to a new area. It was so boring. We were so fucking bored playing it that by the end of the month, only myself and one other of my friends were the only ones still playing it. We were like the last ones, and we said we gave up, we quit. So, Final Fantasy XI, I didn't like at all. But it's funny because apparently there was like this cult following for the game, especially when it went on PlayStation 2. I knew a few people who were like addicted to Final Fantasy XI. They just had to get their MMO fix of Final Fantasy XI every day, which was kind of crazy. Final Fantasy XII was weird because it seemed like Final Fantasy XII took some of the gameplay elements from an MMO and put them into a single-player JRPG. The game's combat plays more like an MMO than anything else. It's turn-based, but it's actually active. It's an active battle system where you can move around the field, and where you're standing will actually increase or decrease the power of your attacks. And it was just a different thing. I played Final Fantasy 12 for about a month, okay, and I played it on and off. It wasn't like I played it all the time. I actually enjoyed grinding and just leveling up my characters and going to areas where I wasn't supposed to go because the game was open world and you could pretty much go almost anywhere you wanted. And I would go to these higher level areas and kill the higher level monsters and level my guy up. My guy was massively over leveled, and then when I went back to the story, I thought the story was boring and I stopped playing. So this is the classic history of what's happened with me and certain games. Is like I started playing, okay, I like it for one reason, then I just fall out of love with it and I stop playing. That happened a lot over the course of my gaming history, okay? And then, of course, everyone knows my history with Final Fantasy 13 and 13-2, both of which I've played on YouTube. So everyone knows, you know, what I thought of those games. And now we're moving into the new era where you got Final Fantasy 14 that's coming out for the PlayStation 3. It's already been out for PC for a year, and it was a massive failure. It's another MMO, and people are saying it was one of the worst MMO launches in history of MMOs. Like, the game was barely even fucking functional when it launched on the PC. So now supposedly they fixed everything, and the game's a lot better now, and it's fully functional. It's coming out for PlayStation 3. Am I really thinking of really trying it out? Probably not. I really don't want to get into an MMO right now like that. That's a time waster, you know what I mean? So I don't know if I'm gonna even ever check that out. I've heard mixed feelings. Some people are like, "Oh, they fixed everything; it's good," and other people are like, "Eh, it's only okay. Don't even bother. It's probably a waste of your time." Okay. And then, of course, now finally it just announced that Final Fantasy 15 is actually just going to be Final Fantasy 13 Versus, or Versus 13, whatever the fuck it was called, because the game's been in development hell for so long, it's going to be pushed out and actually be made officially Final Fantasy 15. We just found that out at E3. That was a huge announcement. It's a good announcement. I am looking forward to Final Fantasy 15. And Final Fantasy 13-3, Lightning Returns, am I going to play it? I don't know. Right now, I'm leaving it as kind of on the fence, undetermined whether or not I'm going to play it or not, because I really don't know if I want to go through another Final Fantasy game. I mean, the last one I played, people literally said, stop playing it, it's too boring. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to be doing, okay? Alright, everyone, so that's it for Back in the Day with DSP. That's pretty much the whole history of my experience with Final Fantasy games. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm now going to take a very short break. So, if you're on the stream, I'm going to run some commercials. Stick around. I'll be right back in a few minutes, and we'll get into the Q&A. So, if you have a last chance to submit questions for the raffle, please do so. If you're watching this on YouTube, go right ahead, go into the description, go to the timestamp, and click to jump ahead to the next part of the podcast, okay? All right, thanks, everyone. I'll be right back, and we're going to do Q&A. Very good. Whoops. Alright, my camera's a little crooked here, everybody. Hold on a second. There we go. I actually did a little bit more adjustment because I was looking at it. I was like, that looks way too overexposed. It looked like there was too much, like almost like the couch was blue. And I was like, why is that? And I messed with it a little bit. And now take a look. Now my shirt actually looks beige instead of white. I actually fixed it, a little bit of adjustment there, okay? Alright, so welcome back to the third and final segment of Hate Live. This is going to be Q&A with the stream chat. They've been submitting their questions. Over 800 people on the stream right now, by the way, who've been submitting their questions all during the course of the podcast. So now what we're going to do is draw some questions from what has been submitted. As of right now, I would like to officially close the raffle, please, if we could. If one of the mods could do that. I don't know what mods are here. Mods, hello? Any mods? Did they not stick around? There we go. Alright, so the raffle is now closed, and we're going to start drawing questions. I'll probably answer questions for about maybe 10-15 minutes, okay? So the first question, this is from the Punisher 009. He says, what will you buy in the Steam sale? I didn't even know there was a Steam sale. So, what will I buy? I have no idea. I guess I should go look at Steam to see if games are on sale. I don't know. Alright, great question. Next question, please. That was a crappy question. I'm sorry. Okay. Alright, this is from Call Me Zway. He says, hey Phil, I understand that you've had some mishaps with Atlas, with them giving you a copyright strike on your Persona 4 Arena videos for the tutorial of the game, which is a shame, but I was wondering if any day you will go back and play the Persona series, like Persona 1, 2, 3, and 4. Thanks for giving this question a chance, Zway. Let me put it this way, it's not entirely out of the question that I would do so. However, it really seems to me, and this is just me from my experience of doing gameplay videos now, that whenever there is a JRPG these days, that people don't really care so much for the playthroughs. And what I mean is take a look at how JRPGs that I've played in the past year or so have performed versus other things. So if I were to do Persona, more than likely it wouldn't be a focus. It would maybe be a game that I play alongside something else. So obviously that I could diversify myself. People don't say, oh God, he's just playing JRPGs. That's actually the reason why with Earthbound, I'm not playing another retro game next to it too, because a lot of the retro games I picked for this summer are all JRPGs. The problem with the Persona series is that I've heard their games are long, very long. So if you're talking about, you know, doing a 100+ part playthrough of a game, and there's really not a lot of interest around JRPGs, then that's spending 100 parts that I could be playing a different game that I'd enjoy just as much, that people probably want to see more. So it's an interesting question. It's not that I would never consider it. I'm not writing it off or anything like that. But at the same time, I don't know when would be the right time to do something like that. Would it be just a niche, you know what I mean, a small group of people who want to see it? I don't know. I haven't had any overwhelming amount of people yelling, Phil, play Persona, play Persona. So really it hasn't been kind of on my radar as of late. But that might change in the future. Okay? Alright, next question is from Afro Peronista. Afro Peronista says, speaking of Killer Instinct, who is your favorite character in the game? When I used to play it, keep in mind I was much younger back then. I was good at fighting games, but I wasn't like competitive level. My favorite character in the game was Riptor. But then later on, I actually learned how to play with a lot of other characters, including Saberwolf, TJ Combo. Everyone learned how to play Orchid, because Orchid had this really easy to do long combo that was hard to break. So a lot of people just picked Orchid and did the same combo over and over and over. But if I'm trying to remember overall, when all is said and done, once I finally learned a little bit more about competitive games, I think I like Jago the best, because Jago was very similar to Ryu or Ken, and he could be played similarly. He has a dragon punch, he's got the fireball, he's actually got, it's not a hurricane kick with him, it's a different moving kind of a swooping arcing kick that goes across the screen, but you could actually employ tactics from games like Street Fighter in Killer Instinct, and he was one of the solid characters that I actually liked, okay? So I don't really have a favorite. I'd say when I did play the game the most, it was Riptor. Okay. Next question. This one's from Light Motif, and he asks, if Zod was real, would you kneel before Zod? Well, it depends, but I, of course, am the Zod father, and this is the United States of Phil, so maybe I would make Zod kneel before me. I don't know. That was a silly question. Alright, next question. This one's from Fist of Sage, and he asks, how do you feel about free-to-play fighting games? I don't know. I guess I would have to see how it works. Now, for example, the model that they had discussed with Killer Instinct that they're doing is basically when you buy an Xbox One, on day one you can download the demo version of Killer Instinct, which is basically the full game, but you can only play with Jago. So you could just play the whole game with Jago, play the story mode, go online, play people against people with Jago, and if that's all you want, that's all you ever have to do. Or you can buy the full game for full retail price, which is $60, or you can choose just to buy the certain characters that you want to play with. So in that case, is that considered free to play? Because really you didn't get the full game unless you paid for it? I don't know. What do you consider? What is free to play when it really comes down to it? For a fighting game, how would that model work? You know what I mean? So I guess my thought is I would like to see a free to play game and what the model actually will be. Is it going to be a game where you do get nickel and dime? You know what I mean? So what if Killer Instinct, if you wanted every character, you literally had to buy them individually, but they cost $5 each, and by the way, there's 20 characters. So now you're telling me I have to spend $100 to play the whole game. So that I would disagree with. So I have to see if someone can properly implement a free-to-play fighting game that's not going to nickel and dime the customer and make them pay more than a retail game. That's what I guess we have to remain to see in the future. Okay? Alright, next question is from Tamitarax. And he says, do you have a favorite video game character or characters? Have there ever been any video game characters that have left an impression on you, such as, wow, this character is awesome, or wow, this villain is so crazy, I love it? You know, again, I have to go to the classics. I have to go to the games that I like the most from my childhood. And again, it's going to go back to something like SNES, okay? And so I have to say, some of my favorite characters from my favorite games. Frog in Chrono Trigger, I think, is an awesome character. He's an honorable dude who got transmorphed into a frog by a mage, and all he wants to do is basically serve with honor. And that's all he cares about. You've got Magus. Magus is such a complex character because he's an evil dude for most of the game, and then come to find out he actually isn't so evil a dude when you find out what happened to him in the past and what made him become evil. And the fact that at some point in the game you can actually play as him and he joins you is so freaking awesome. I really like that about the game. In Final Fantasy, some of my favorite characters. Cecil, obviously. Cecil and Kain. Like the dynamic duo. They're so cool. They play off each other well with all the drama that happens in Final Fantasy IV. I really enjoy both of those characters. Rydia, the summoner, of course. She was awesome. She starts off as a little girl, and she's kind of weak and crappy. But when she comes back later on in the game, she's super powerful. She's like basically a teenager. She's like 18 or 19 or whatever, and she's supposed to be like hot or whatever. And she could summon giant powerful monsters. She was my favorite character in all of Final Fantasy IV. In Final Fantasy VI, obviously some of my favorite characters there. Sabin. I love Sabin. He was the cool, kind of tough martial artist. He was an awesome character. Kefka is my favorite villain of all time. By far, Kefka. He's just an insane lunatic. You don't know what his angle is for most of the game. Sometimes, by the time you find out at the end of the game, though, his angle is just basically chaos because he's nuts. Is fucking insane. I just love the character. The cool twists, his laugh. Everything about him is iconic. I'm sure there are characters in every era, you know, that I would say are iconic and that I find is the best. I'd say that overall, though, my favorite villain is Kefka of all time. I really like that character. Okay, let's do next question. This one is from CD2113, and the question is, what are your thoughts on the gameplay of GTA 5? I already answered that one in the podcast, so we're going to move on to another question. If you don't know, go to the first segment of the podcast. That's where I talked about that, okay? Next question from Reggie819. He says, Phil, what do you believe are the best and worst game types? I don't know exactly what you mean by that. Do you mean, if you mean genres of games? It's not like I think that one genre sucks ass and isn't any good and another genre is better than one genre. Obviously, I have personal preferences. I like fighting games because I grew up with them. I was competitive in them. I like JRPGs because, again, I grew up with them. I think that some of the best writing ever in games was done in JRPGs. But I don't know if that's really what the question means. Unfortunately, the question should have been maybe worded a little bit more clearly. So, all right, let's draw another question. This one is from ETH1C, and he asks, what is the best fighting game for beginners? See, and herein lies the question. When you ask that, does that mean, is this the best fighting game for a beginner to learn how to play and play on a competitive level? Is this just the best game for a beginner to jump in and just try to have fun? Because there are different levels of competition with a fighting game. Some people are perfectly content to buy a fighting game, play through the story mode with a bunch of the characters that they like, maybe go online, mess around a little bit with the online play, maybe do if there's any additional challenge modes or whatever, and that's it. They don't care about ever getting to a competitive level with the game. And then you've got games that really, I'm only playing this game because I want to be competitive. I want to be able to beat other people in a competitive setting. So it really depends on what you're asking. I could tell you that some of the games that have had the most content ever for, I guess you would say, the more casual audience would actually be the Soul Calibur series of games. Now, as of late, it seems like they've actually reduced the amount of content that they have in those. However, in the old days, like the Soul Caliburs that were on like the Dreamcast and the PlayStations, they basically had like a long story mode, and then there would be an optional side mode here, a challenge mode here, all this unlockable, fun, continuous content. I remember playing through Soul Calibur 1 on the Dreamcast, and just going through I think it was the story mode or the challenge mode, whatever it was, and you could change up characters as you were playing. It was really a lot of fun. As of late, some games that have similar content. One would be the Mortal Kombat reboot that happened a year or two ago. That game not only had a cool story for an ongoing story that involved all the characters, but also had a huge challenge ladder that was just way fun optional content, okay? Now, if you're asking me what's the easiest fighting game for a beginner to get into, I don't know if I can answer that simply because today, a lot of the fighting games are very easy to get into. A game like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, where a lot of the combos are very basic to do, but can do ridiculous, insane damage, you know what I mean, and kill an entire character after one hit. A game like Street Fighter 4, where they've dumbed down the button and joystick inputs to the point where you can just double tap a fucking diagonal and press a button and a fucking reversal dragon punch comes out. So really, this modern era of games, they've really dumbed down games to be easier to play for the common person. I personally think that that's a bad thing. I think that if they wanted to do that, okay, you're going to dumb down button inputs, that's fine, but only have it work, say, in story mode. But when you're playing competitively, you can't do that shit. But they made it super easy, and now look how many new hundreds, if not thousands of people have joined the tournament scene because it's an easier game to play. So it's a double-edged sword. The quality of the gameplay goes down, but more people are able to play better at the game. So, I don't know. Capcom basically took the money route there. But I'd say any Capcom game that's come out in the past several years would be probably your easiest game to jump into because of the lax button inputs and the more relaxed gameplay, honestly. I would love to see some of these people who play games only play games like Street Fighter 4, like they weren't around back in the day. I would like to see them try to play fucking CVS 2 or Marvel vs. Capcom 2 or Third Strike at a high level, because I don't think they could do it. Alright? Next question. This one is from Soul2092. And he says, Phil, with the Xbox 360 having the red ring of death, and with the PlayStation 3 having the yellow ring of death, do you think we might see similar problems 3 to 6 months down the line? I guess he's saying with the new consoles. I mean, yeah. I mean, undoubtedly, it's a possibility. It's new hardware. It has not had a mass test yet. This is the problem. You may have a piece of hardware that you've designed, and you have it in a lab, and you have gamers playing on it, but until that goes out into the actual market, you don't know what's going to happen with that unit. So Microsoft probably had no clue that this was going to happen with the Xbox 360, because it really, for a lot of people, the red rings didn't happen until some months afterwards. So they didn't have someone constantly playing on the console for months and months and months before its release. So how would they know that all the things were going to red ring? The same thing with the PlayStation 3 issues. I definitely think there's going to be hardware issues. At least, though, I'm hoping that we learn from this last generation and we don't have a super widespread issue like the red ring of death that becomes common. Okay? I'm expecting problems, but I'm hoping it's not as big of a disaster as the red ring was. Okay, next question is from Kills Joys, and he says, will you ever consider doing a Persona 4 playthrough? Oh my god, this is the same question. This is the same question as the other guy about Persona, so let's skip that and go on to the next one. The next question is from I can't read it. What on earth? Arinizer? How the fuck do you say that name? Arinizer. Anyway, do you know that Dota 2 is released and are you going to play it? At one point I was considering it, but I have no desire to. It already has its own community, you know what I mean? Thousands and thousands of people on Twitch watching it and playing it. I have no real interest in it, so I'm probably never going to play it. Okay. Alright, I'm probably going to do 2 more questions. The final 2 questions, okay? So here's the next to last question. This one is from Topistlel. What? Topestlel? What is with these names? Topestlel? You can't even pronounce it. Alright, anyway. How often do you use your 3DS and Vita? And do you have any game you're anticipating for either system? My Vita I almost never use. I bought it last year. Obviously, I reviewed it. I played a few games on it, including Uncharted Golden Abyss. That first one was a Dungeon Hunter or whatever the hell it was. That first one that I played. And I played like 1 or 2 other games on it. And then really there hasn't been anything out that I really want to play on it. It's funny because, you know, they announced, oh, it's going to be like a portable PS3 and it's going to be amazing. And now really, realistically, outside of a small handful of games that people have been buying, what have you played on your Vita lately? It really just sits there and collects dust, okay? The 3DS I do play a little bit more. Just recently, I'd say probably about a month ago, maybe a little bit less than a month ago, I did play and beat Castlevania Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate. And I'm interested to see if that game is actually going to be a bridge between the plots of Castlevania Lords of Shadow Part 1 and Part 2, which supposedly is coming out later this year. Was it a bridge to bridge the story gap between it, or is it just a side story? Because it actually directly was related to the plot of Lords of Shadow 1, and I'm interested to see how it leads in. But I did actually really like that game. Right now, the game that I have, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, I have it. I haven't had a chance to play it yet. And it's funny because I just went out to Texas. I ended up actually messing more around with my iPhone that was brand new and messing around with this and playing with apps and shit on this than I did playing my 3DS. So this will be the next game I play on 3DS if and when I ever get to it. Right now I really don't have any plans on playing stuff on 3DS or Vita, okay? Okay. Let's see. Oh my god, there's 1,000 questions that got pulled here. So, a couple got pulled. First of all, have I ever been in a fist fight? Yes. I've been in a couple. They were stupid. And there's no reason to get into a fist fight, really. Do you think Amazing Frog is a Game of the Year competitor? Of course. Come on, man. I mean, ask me these silly questions. And how did you meet John Rambo? I've already answered that question about 400 times. Literally 400 times. Alright, we'll do one more question. Can we do one more question? Let's pull one more. Last question, because I got all screwed up. Does it not work? What on earth? Do I like motorboating, Leanna? Well, I've never been motorboating before, so I don't know. Now it pulled way too many questions. They're working on us. Team working on Amazing Frog sequel. That's great, but there's no question involved. All right, I think we're done. I think we've answered enough silly questions for the night. So thank you, everyone, for joining me for tonight's Hate Live podcast. I hope that it was enjoyable for you. We're going to be back next week. There will be Hate Live next week, so don't worry. You're not going to miss out or anything like that. I believe it's actually in 2 weeks that I'm not doing it because my girlfriend will be visiting. But next week we are going to be doing another Hate Live. And again, we'll be talking more about gaming news, more about my schedule. We're going to do another back in the day, more Q&A. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining me on the stream tonight. Over 800 attendees on the stream, which is excellent. Thank you very much for your viewership there. I very much appreciate it. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you very much for watching on YouTube. By the way, if you are watching this on the stream and you missed any part, I'm going to leave this archived on Twitch TV, but also I'm uploading it to the King of Hate vlogs as soon as I go down, as soon as I take the stream down. So feel free to go check it out at your leisure. Okay, everybody? All right, thanks for Hate Live. I'm Darkside Phil, signing off for July 11th, 2013. Hope you had a good time tonight. I'll see you all for new gameplay. The conclusion of Metal Gear Solid tomorrow. More Demon's Souls. Cool stuff coming up this weekend. I can't wait. Hope to see you then. Thanks a lot. Peace out, everybody. Have a good night.